For 300 years, Dr. Kthavar had dug through dusty records. His 6 arms worked fast, sorting ancient files in the massive library of Zenturi Prime. Other scholars thought he was crazy for wasting time on dead languages and lost worlds. They said he should work on modern science, not old tales. But Kthavar knew something they didn't. Hidden in the oldest records were warnings that made his blood freeze. The first stone tablet was black as night. It came from the Velkari people who vanished 2,000 years ago. The writing was tough to read, but he figured out most of it. It told of beings from a blue world at the galaxy's edge. The Velkari called them the ones who never gave up fighting. At first, Kthavar thought it was just another war story. Every dead race had tales about their enemies. Then he found a second tablet from the Morden people. They lived on the opposite side of the galaxy from the Velkari. They never could have met. But their tablet told the same story about the same blue world. The writing looked different, but the message was clear. They wrote about 2-legged creatures who fought not just to win, but to live at any cost. These beings would die before giving up. They made weapons from everything around them. They never stopped changing to face new dangers. Kthavar found more tablets over the next 50 years. 12 different races, all gone, all with the same warning. The Zafani called them the Endless Warriors. The Torvak named them Death Walking on 2 Legs. The ancient Kriller wrote simply, "They will eat everything." Each tablet pointed to the same spot in space, a small yellow star with 9 planets. The 3rd planet was blue and green, covered mostly in water. The warnings all said the same thing. Never go to that world. Never wake the creatures living there. They are too dangerous to live alongside other life. The tablets were ancient. Some were 10,000 years old. Others were older still. But they all agreed on one thing. The creatures from the blue world were the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Kthavar brought his findings to the Galactic Council. He stood before the great meeting hall where hundreds of worlds sent representatives to make decisions. The hall was enormous, with seats rising in circles around the speaking floor. Thousands of different alien species looked down at him with curiosity and doubt. "Honored council members," Kthavar began, his voice shaking with excitement. "I have found something that could change everything we know about our galaxy." Council leader Zarath, a tall blue creature with 4 eyes, looked bored. "Dr. Kthavar, we have heard about your love for old stories." "Please be quick." Kthavar turned on the holographic display. Images of the ancient tablets appeared floating above him. These tablets come from 12 different peoples. They lived in different parts of the galaxy at different times. None of them ever met, yet they all warn about the same thing. The council members leaned forward slightly. A few seemed interested now. They warn about a species from a blue world at the outer edge, a species that fights differently than any other life form. They do not fight for land or resources. They fight to survive, and they never stop fighting. Council member Tara from the trade worlds laughed. "Dr. Kthavar, we have checked that area many times. There are only primitive worlds there, no advanced peoples at all. But that is exactly what makes this so important," Kthavar said, his voice getting louder. "What if they are not advanced yet? What if they are still growing? The tablets say these creatures change quickly. What happens when they finally reach the stars?" The council chamber filled with alien laughter. Species from across the galaxy found the idea funny. The great Zenturi Empire had ruled for 5,000 years. They had beaten every enemy they ever faced. The idea that some primitive creatures could be a threat was silly. "Dr. Kthavar," said council leader Zarath, "you're asking us to fear creatures that cannot even fly in space. Our scouts report that the 3rd planet in that system has millions of small tribes fighting each other with crude weapons. They cannot even unite their own world. How could they possibly threaten the galaxy?" Kthavar felt his heart sinking. They were not listening. They could not see what he saw in the ancient warnings. "But the tablets clearly state—" "The tablets," interrupted council member Yakani from the warrior caste, "were written by dead peoples that were clearly too weak to survive. Perhaps they were simply afraid of everything." Laughter filled the chamber. Kthavar tried to speak again, but council leader Zarath raised his hand for silence. "Dr. Kthavar, we appreciate your research, but the council has more important matters to discuss. We suggest you focus your studies on something more useful to today." The session ended. Kthavar stood alone on the speaking floor as thousands of alien representatives filed out of the chamber. None of them seemed worried. None of them understood what the ancient warnings really meant. That same day, far across the galaxy, Captain Jake Morrison was getting ready for humanity's first journey to another star. He stood on the bridge of the UES Horizon, looking out at the stars through the main view screen. His crew was small but skilled. Engineer Lisa Brooks was checking the new faster-than-light drive for the 100th time. Dr. Alex Turner was reviewing their science mission goals. Communications Officer Ben Clark was testing their long-range communication systems. "All systems ready, Captain," Lisa reported from her station. "The drive is working perfectly," Jake nodded. "Ben, any word from Earth Command?" "Just the standard good luck message, sir," Ben replied. "We are cleared for departure." Jake looked around at his crew. They were about to make history. Humanity was finally going to the stars. After centuries of looking up at the night sky and wondering what was out there, they were about to find out. "Take us out, Lisa," Jake ordered. The horizon jumped to faster-than-light speed. Behind them, Earth grew smaller until it was just another point of light. Ahead of them waited the unknown. None of them knew that ancient warnings had been written about their species. None of them knew that 12 peoples had tried to warn the galaxy about humanity. And none of them knew that very soon the galaxy would remember why those warnings existed. The UES Horizon dropped out of faster-than-light speed near a bright yellow star. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge watching the star grow larger on the main screen. This was the first time humans had ever traveled this far from Earth. The excitement on the bridge was easy to feel. "Scan complete, Captain," Dr. Alex Turner reported from his science station. "3 planets in this system. The second one looks like it might have had water once." "Any signs of life?" Jake asked. "Nothing on the planets, but—" Alex paused and looked at his readings again. "Captain, I'm picking up something else. Large metallic objects heading our way." Jake felt his stomach tighten. "How large?" "Much larger than us, sir. 5 ships, each about 3 times the size of the horizon." Before Jake could respond, the communication system started beeping. Ben Clark quickly worked at his station. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission. It's not in any Earth language, but the computer is trying to translate." "Put it through!" Jake ordered. A voice filled the bridge. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Zenturi space without permission. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed." Jake looked at his crew. They were all staring at him, waiting for his decision. This was first contact with an alien species. Everything they said now would be remembered in history books. "Ben, open a channel," Jake said. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth vessel Horizon. We come in peace. We did not know this was your space. We are explorers from the planet Earth." There was a long pause. Then the alien voice came back, but this time it sounded different, more suspicious. "Earth, we have no record of this world. You will surrender your vessel for inspection. Any resistance will result in your destruction." Jake felt his crew looking at him again. Lisa Brooks spoke up from her engineering station. "Captain, their ships are much more advanced than ours. If they want to fight, we don't stand a chance." "No," Jake replied quietly. Then he spoke into the communicator again. "We understand. We will cooperate with your inspection." The alien ships moved closer. Jake could see them clearly now on the main screen. They were sleek and powerful with weapons that looked like they could destroy the horizon with a single shot. One of the ships was much larger than the others. Clearly the command vessel. On board the Zenturi command ship, Commander Villar studied the human vessel on his screen. He had been patrolling the sector for 50 years and had never seen anything like it. The ship was crude compared to Zenturi technology, but it was clearly capable of faster-than-light travel. That meant the species that built it was more advanced than his first scan suggested. "Analysis complete, Commander," his science officer reported. "The vessel appears to be from a species we have never encountered. Their technology is primitive but functional. The ship carries only 4 life forms." Valar nodded. "Prepare a boarding party. We will examine their vessel and determine if they pose a threat to the Empire." "Sir," his communications officer said, "they claim to be peaceful explorers." "That is what they all say," Valar replied. "But a species that can build faster-than-light ships without our knowledge is a species that could be dangerous. We will take no chances." The boarding party prepared to transfer to the human ship. Valar decided to lead it himself. He wanted to see these humans with his own eyes. On the horizon, Jake watched the alien boarding craft approach. "Remember," he told his crew, We are representing all of humanity right now. Stay calm and answer their questions honestly. The boarding craft attached to the Horizon's hull. Jake and his crew waited in the main corridor as the aliens cut through their airlock. The first thing that struck Jake was how tall the aliens were. They stood nearly 8 feet high with blue skin and 4 arms. Their leader stepped forward. "I am Commander Vaylor of the Zenturi Navy," the alien said through a translation device. "You will answer my questions truthfully." "Of course," Jake replied. "I am Captain Jake Morrison. These are my officers." Vaylor studied the humans carefully. They were smaller than he expected, but something about them made him uneasy. They stood straight and looked directly at him, showing no fear. "Most primitive species cowered when they first met the Zenturi. Where is your home world?" Vaylor asked. "Earth," Jake answered. "It's about 15 light years from here." "How many ships does your species have?" Jake hesitated. The truth was that the Horizon was humanity's only faster-than-light ship, but something told him that admitting this might not be wise. "We have others," he said carefully. Vaylor's eyes narrowed. The human was being evasive. "How many others?" "Several," Jake replied, trying to sound confident. This was a lie, and Vaylor could sense it. He had dealt with many species over the years, and he could usually tell when someone was not telling the truth. But something about these humans bothered him. They were too calm for a species that had just met a superior alien force. "Commander," one of his officers said quietly, "our scans show that their ship is alone. There are no other vessels in this system." Vaylor processed this information. The humans were lying about their numbers. This could mean several things. Either they were scouts for a larger force, or they were trying to hide their weakness. Either possibility made them dangerous. "You are scouts," he said to Jake. "You are here to gather information about our space for an invasion." Jake's eyes widened. "No, that's not true." "We're explorers. We're just trying to learn about the galaxy." "All species say that," Vaylor replied coldly. "Then they return with warships." The situation was getting worse by the minute. Jake could see the suspicion in the alien commander's eyes. Every word he spoke seemed to make things worse. "Please," Jake said. "We mean no harm. We didn't even know you existed until today." Vaylor made his decision. These humans were clearly scouts for a larger force. The fact that they had developed faster-than-light travel without the Zenturi knowing about it proved they were dangerous. He could not allow them to return to their home world with information about Zenturi space. "You will be taken to Zenturi Prime for questioning," he announced. "Your ship will be impounded." "That's not necessary," Jake protested. "We'll leave your space immediately and never return." "It is too late for that," Vaylor said. He turned to his officers. "Prepare to tow their vessel." Jake felt panic rising in his chest. If they were taken prisoner, Earth would never know what happened to them. Worse, Earth would never know that hostile aliens existed so close to home. "Wait," he said desperately. "Let me contact my homeworld. I can prove we're peaceful." Vaylor was done talking. He signaled to his officers to begin the towing operation. But as they moved to carry out his orders, something went wrong. The human ship's engines suddenly came to life at full power. In the Horizon's engine room, Lisa Brooks had been listening to the conversation through the ship's internal communication system. When she heard that they were going to be taken prisoner, she made a decision that would change everything. She overrode the safety protocols and pushed the engines to maximum power. The Horizon broke free from the boarding craft and accelerated rapidly. On the bridge, Jake realized what Lisa had done. "Lisa, what are you doing?" "Getting us out of here, Captain," she replied over the intercom. "They're not going to let us go." But the Zenturi ships were faster. They quickly surrounded the Horizon and opened fire. The first energy blast hit the hull and sent the ship spinning. Alarms sounded throughout the vessel. "Hull breach in Section 3, Ben reported. "We're losing atmosphere." Jake knew they couldn't outrun the alien ships. They were outgunned and outnumbered. In a few minutes, the Horizon would be destroyed, and humanity's first contact with aliens would end in disaster. Then he remembered something from his military training. Sometimes the only way to win was to make the enemy pay such a high price for victory that they would think twice about fighting you again. "Lisa," he said into the intercom, "prepare to ram the lead ship." "Captain," Lisa's voice was uncertain. "You heard me. Get everyone to the escape pods. I'm staying behind to make sure we hit them hard. His crew looked at him in shock. Jake, you can't, Alex said. There has to be another way. There isn't, Jake replied. But maybe if we hurt them enough, they'll think twice before attacking the next human ship they meet. As his crew reluctantly headed for the escape pods, Jake turned the horizon toward the largest Zenturi ship. Commander Valar watched in disbelief as the primitive human vessel accelerated directly at his command ship. What are they doing? His weapons officer asked. Valar realized the truth just before impact. They're sacrificing themselves to save their crew. The horizon smashed into the Zenturi command ship at full speed. The explosion lit up space like a new star. When the light faded, both ships were gone. Lisa Brooks floated in her escape pod for 6 days before a human rescue ship found her. She was the only survivor from the Horizon's crew. When the rescue team brought her aboard, she was barely alive. But she had something more valuable than her life. She had the complete sensor data from their encounter with the Zenturi. 3 weeks later, Lisa sat in a hospital bed on Earth, telling her story to Admiral Kate Sullivan. The Admiral listened carefully as Lisa described the alien ships, their weapons, and how they had attacked without warning. They were going to take us prisoner, Lisa said, her voice still weak from her ordeal. Captain Morrison knew they would never let us go home. He gave his life so Earth would know what's out there. Admiral Sullivan studied the sensor data on her tablet. The alien ships were more advanced than anything Earth had ever built. Their weapons could destroy human vessels with ease. Their technology was centuries ahead of humanity's best efforts. How many ships did they have? The Admiral asked. 5 in that patrol group, Lisa replied. But their commander talked like there were many more. He called it the Zenturi Empire. Admiral Sullivan felt a cold fear settle in her stomach. An empire meant thousands of ships, maybe millions, and they were only 15 light years from Earth. The next day, Admiral Sullivan stood before the Earth Defense Council. Representatives from every nation sat around the large table, their faces grim as they listened to her report. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, we are no longer alone in the universe, and we are not safe. She activated the holographic display, showing them the data from the Horizon's encounter. The alien ships appeared in the air above the table, their sleek forms and massive weapons clear for all to see. The Zenturi attacked our ship without warning, she continued. They intended to take our people prisoner. When Captain Morrison tried to escape, they opened fire with intent to destroy. President Helen Carter leaned forward. What are you recommending, Admiral? Admiral Sullivan took a deep breath. We prepare for war, the room erupted in worried voices. Representatives argued with each other in a dozen different languages. Finally, President Carter called for quiet. Admiral, surely we can negotiate with them, said Ambassador John Lee from the Diplomatic Corps. There must be some way to make peace. They fired first, Admiral Sullivan replied firmly. They showed no interest in talking. They saw us as a threat to be eliminated. Dr. Sam Hayes, Earth's top scientist, spoke up from his seat. Admiral, you're talking about fighting an empire that has technology centuries ahead of ours. How do we fight ships that can destroy us with one shot? Admiral Sullivan smiled grimly. The same way our ancestors fought when they were outgunned. We don't fight fair. Over the next month, Earth transformed. Every military base became a production center. Every scientist worked on new weapons. Every engineer designed new ships. The planet had not seen such unity since the great wars of the previous century. Colonel Mike Davis led the effort to design new fighting ships. He studied the sensor data from the Horizon and made a shocking decision. Instead of trying to match Zenturi technology, he would ignore it completely. We can't build ships as good as theirs, he told his team. So we won't try. We'll build ships designed to do one thing, ram their vessels and explode. The new ships were called rams. They were small, fast, and packed with nuclear weapons. Each one carried enough explosive power to destroy a city. More importantly, they needed no crew. They were completely automated, guided by artificial intelligence, programmed with one simple order: find the enemy and crash into them. Dr. Amy Collins worked on a different kind of weapon. She studied the biological data that Dr. Alex Turner had gathered before his death. The Zenturi were similar enough to Earth life that certain Earth diseases might affect them. We can't kill them with our weapons, she told her research team. but maybe we can kill them with our germs. Working around the clock, Dr. Collins developed viruses designed specifically to attack Zenturi biology. The viruses would be loaded into special warheads that would spread the disease through enemy ships' air systems. Engineer Tony Martinez focused on a third approach. He designed ships that looked like ordinary cargo vessels but were actually mobile weapons platforms. They would get close to enemy ships by pretending to surrender, then attack at close range. "If they want to board our ships," he said, "we'll let them. Then we'll blow up both ships." Admiral Sullivan coordinated all these efforts from her command center beneath the Rocky Mountains. She had learned something important from studying Earth's military history. When facing a superior enemy, the key was not to fight the way they expected. "The Zenturi are used to civilized warfare," she told her staff. "They follow rules. They try to minimize casualties. They fight with honor." She paused and looked around the room. "We're going to fight to survive." The first human counterattack came 6 months after the Horizon incident. A Zenturi patrol found what looked like a disabled human cargo ship drifting in space. Commander Yell Nash decided to board it and capture any survivors for questioning. The moment his boarding party entered the human ship, it exploded. The blast was so powerful it destroyed both vessels completely. Commander Yell Nash and his entire crew died instantly. Similar attacks began happening throughout Zenturi space. Human ships would appear, seemingly helpless, and when Zenturi forces moved to capture them, they would explode. The explosions were always massive, designed to take out as many enemy ships as possible. Captain Nick Thompson led the first human boarding action 3 months later. His ship, disguised as a damaged freighter, was captured by a Zenturi cruiser. When the aliens brought it into their cargo bay, Thompson and his Marines emerged from hidden compartments. The Zenturi were not prepared for close combat inside their own ship. Human soldiers were smaller and faster in the narrow corridors. They wore armor that could stop Zenturi energy weapons, and they carried weapons designed for ship-to-ship fighting. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was over, Thompson's team had captured the entire Zenturi cruiser. More importantly, they had captured its crew alive. Dr. Collins's biological weapons were tested on the prisoners. The results exceeded her expectations. The Zenturi had no immunity to Earth diseases. A single virus could kill an entire ship's crew within days. Word of these new human tactics spread quickly through the Zenturi Empire. Ship commanders who had once been eager to engage unknown vessels now approached them with extreme caution. The humans were not fighting like any enemy they had ever faced. Commander Valar, who had survived the destruction of his ship during the Horizon incident, tried to warn his superiors about what they were facing. "These humans do not fight like a civilized species," he reported to the Zenturi High Command. "They use every dirty trick imaginable. They sacrifice their own lives just to kill a few of our people. They turn everything into a weapon." But the Zenturi High Command did not listen. They were confident that their superior technology would eventually win the war. They ordered more ships to human space, expecting to crush the primitive enemy through overwhelming force. They had no idea that humanity was just getting started. Admiral Sullivan received reports of every human victory, no matter how small. Each success proved that her strategy was working. The Zenturi might have better technology, but humans had something the aliens could not understand: the willingness to do whatever it took to survive. "They expected us to fight like civilized beings," she told President Carter during one of their daily briefings. "They expected us to surrender when we were outgunned. They expected us to follow their rules." She looked at the star map on her wall, showing the locations of recent battles. Red dots marked human victories. "There were more red dots every day. But we're not civilized when our survival is at stake," she continued. "We're the species that survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars. We're the species that turned warfare into a science long before we reached the stars." President Carter nodded grimly. "How long before they realize what they're really fighting?" Admiral Sullivan smiled coldly. "They're starting to figure it out. But by then it will be too late." Far across the galaxy, Dr. Kathavar sat in his study, reading the latest reports from the war zone. The ancient tablets lay open on his desk, their warnings clear in the dim light. The humans were doing exactly what the tablets said they would do. They were consuming the war, adapting to it, and emerging stronger from every battle. The Zenturi Empire was learning what 12 extinct peoples had tried to warn them about. Some species were too dangerous to fight, and humanity was one of them. The war had been going on for 2 years when the first rebellion started. The Cathani people lived on a mining world at the edge of Zenturi space. They had served the Empire for over 300 years, digging precious metals from their planet's core. They had never caused trouble before. But the Cathani had been listening to human radio broadcasts. The humans transmitted messages across the galaxy in dozens of languages, telling other species about the war. The messages were simple. The Zenturi are not invincible. We are proving it every day. Join us and be free. Elder Veer called a secret meeting of the Cathani Council. The old mining leader had watched his people suffer under Zenturi rule for his entire life. Now, for the first time, he saw hope. The humans are winning battles, he told the council. They destroyed 3 Zenturi battle groups last month. If they can fight the Empire, so can we. The rebellion started small. Mining equipment broke down more often. Shipments of metals arrived late. Guards found themselves locked in storage rooms. Within weeks, the Cathani had stopped all metal production. The Zenturi response was swift and brutal. Commander Zextal arrived with 2 battle cruisers and a battalion of troops. He expected to crush the rebellion in a few days. Instead, he found that the Cathani had learned from human tactics. They had turned their mining tunnels into death traps. They used mining explosives to collapse tunnels on Zenturi troops. They poisoned the air in the mines with gases from their industrial equipment. The Zenturi had trained to fight in space. They were not prepared for underground warfare against an enemy that knew every tunnel and cave on the planet. Commander Zextal sent desperate messages back to Zenturi Prime. The rebels are using human tactics. They fight like animals. They show no mercy to prisoners. I need more troops, but the Empire had no more troops to send. Every available ship was fighting the humans. Captain Rachel Stone led the human assault on the fortress world of Nexvar. The planet was supposed to be impossible to attack. It had orbital defense platforms that could destroy entire fleets. It had underground bunkers that could survive nuclear attacks. It had enough supplies to withstand a siege for decades. Rachel studied the planet's defenses for months before making her attack plan. She realized that the Zenturi had built their fortress to defend against normal attacks. They had not prepared for human-style warfare. We're not going to attack their defenses, she told her team. We're going to make their defenses attack themselves. Rachel's plan was simple and terrible. Human ships would approach the planet carrying what looked like refugees. The ships would broadcast distress signals claiming to be civilian vessels fleeing from human space. When the Zenturi allowed them to approach, the ships would crash into the planet's main power stations. The plan worked perfectly. The fortress world's defenses went dark. Emergency power kept some systems running, but not enough to stop what came next. Maria Gonzalez led a team of human snipers who had been hidden in the refugee ships. While the Zenturi tried to restore power, Maria's team eliminated key personnel from long range. Carl Johnson led the demolition experts who destroyed the planet's communication systems. Within 6 hours, the fortress world was cut off from the Empire and defenseless. The human fleet moved in and demanded surrender. Commander Heltra, the fortress commander, had never surrendered in 40 years of military service. But he was facing an enemy unlike any he had ever fought. The humans had turned his own defenses against him. They had used his mercy toward refugees as a weapon. What kind of species uses civilians as weapons? He asked his second-in-command. The kind that wins wars, came the reply. The surrender of Nexvar sent shockwaves through the Zenturi Empire. If the fortress worlds could fall to human tactics, nowhere was safe. Admiral Peter Kim commanded the human fleet as it pushed deeper into Zenturi space. He had learned much from studying captured Zenturi ships. The aliens were excellent engineers and skilled warriors, but they followed predictable patterns. They fight the way they think civilized beings should fight, he explained to his captains during a strategy meeting. They give warnings before attacking. They try to minimize civilian casualties. They follow ancient codes of military honor. He pointed to the star map showing their recent victories. We fight to win. We use whatever works. We adapt to every situation. That's why we're winning. The breaking point came when humans captured a major Zenturi communication hub. Dr. Kevin White had spent months learning how to operate captured Zenturi technology. Now he used that knowledge to broadcast a message to every world in the galaxy. The message was transmitted in over 200 alien languages. It was simple and direct. This is humanity. We did not start this war, but we will finish it. Any species that helps the Zenturi will be treated as our enemy. Any species that helps us will have our protection. The Zenturi Empire is falling. Choose your side wisely. The message was heard on thousands of worlds. Species that had never heard of humans suddenly learned that a new power was rising in the galaxy. A power that had brought the mighty Zenturi Empire to its knees. The effect was immediate. Rebellion started on dozens of worlds. Species that had served the Empire for centuries suddenly remembered what freedom felt like. The Zenturi found themselves fighting wars on 100 different fronts. Commander Valar, now missing his left arm from a human boarding action, stood in the ruins of what had once been Zenturi Naval Command. Human cyber attacks had destroyed most of their computer systems. Human saboteurs had blown up their main shipyards. Human biological weapons had killed thousands of their best officers. He thought about the first human ship he had encountered 2 years ago. The primitive vessel with its crude technology and small crew. He had thought it was no threat to the Empire. Now he understood what Dr. Kthavaar had been trying to tell them. The ancient warnings had been real. Humanity was exactly what their ancestors had feared. A junior officer approached him with the latest casualty reports. "Sir, we've lost another 12 ships in the Outer Rim. The humans are using a new tactic. They're attaching explosives to asteroids and launching them at our vessels." Valar was not surprised. Every week, the humans developed new ways to kill Zenturi forces. They were the most adaptable enemy he had ever faced. "Sir," the officer continued, "High Command is asking for your recommendations." Valar looked at the young officer. The recruit was barely old enough to serve, rushed into the military because so many experienced soldiers were dead. "My recommendation?" Valar said quietly. "End this war before it ends us." The officer looked shocked. "Sir, we can't surrender to a primitive species." "They are not primitive," Valar replied. "They are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and we woke them up. On Earth, Admiral Sullivan received reports of victories from across the galaxy. Human forces were winning battles that should have been impossible. Species throughout the Empire were joining the rebellion. The Zenturi military was collapsing under pressure from 100 different directions. But Sullivan knew the war was not over yet. The Zenturi still had their home fleet. They still controlled their core worlds. And desperate enemies could do dangerous things. "They're going to try something big," she told her staff during their daily briefing. "They can't win the war anymore, but they might try to destroy Earth out of spite." General Linda Foster, commander of Earth's Home Defense Forces, nodded grimly. "Our long-range sensors show massive ship movements in Zenturi space. They're gathering everything they have left." Admiral Sullivan studied the intelligence reports. The Zenturi were preparing for one final battle. They would throw everything they had at Earth, hoping to destroy humanity's home world, even if it cost them their entire remaining fleet. "Let them come," Sullivan said finally. "We'll be ready." She looked around the room at her officers. These people had led humanity through the greatest war in its history. They had taken a species that barely knew how to travel between stars and turned it into a galactic power. "The ancient warnings spoke of humans," she said. "They said we were too dangerous to exist alongside other life. The Zenturi are about to learn that those warnings were not a threat. They were a promise. The final battle was coming, and humanity would be ready for it." The Zenturi fleet arrived at Earth with over 300 ships. It was the largest military force the Empire had ever assembled. Supreme Commander Nalesh stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the blue planet that had caused so much trouble. "This is where it all began," he said to his officers. "This is where we end it." The plan was simple. The Zenturi would destroy Earth and every human in the solar system. Even if it cost them their entire fleet, the galaxy would be safe from the human threat. But as the Zenturi ships moved closer to Earth, they found something unexpected. The solar system was empty. No human ships were visible. No defense platforms protected the planet. Earth seemed completely defenseless. "This has to be a trap," warned Commander Valar, who had been assigned to the flagship for this final battle. The humans would never leave their home world unprotected. Supreme Commander Nalesh disagreed. They are spread too thin, fighting across the galaxy. They cannot defend everywhere at once. He was wrong. The attack began when the Zenturi fleet was halfway to Earth. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids and moons where they had been hiding. But these were not ordinary ships. They were completely new designs that no Zenturi had ever seen before. Admiral Lisa Brooks, now commanding the human home fleet, smiled grimly as her ships opened fire. She had survived the destruction of the horizon 3 years ago. Now she would make the Zenturi pay for every human life they had taken. All ships, execute Battle Plan Omega, she ordered. The human ships moved like nothing the Zenturi had ever faced. They were faster, more maneuverable, and carried weapons that seemed impossible. The humans had spent 3 years studying captured Zenturi technology. Now they had built ships that were better than anything the Empire possessed. But the real surprise was not the human ships. It was their allies. Ships from dozens of rebel species emerged from hiding throughout the solar system. The Cathani had brought their mining vessels converted into mobile weapons platforms. The Velkari had sent their fastest scouts, now loaded with human-designed missiles. Even the peaceful Morden had joined the fight, their cargo ships carrying devastating new weapons. Supreme Commander Nalesh watched in horror as his massive fleet was surrounded. "How many species are fighting with them?" "All of them, sir," his sensor officer replied. "Every major rebellion has sent ships to defend Earth." The battle lasted 18 hours. The Zenturi fought with desperate courage, knowing this was their last chance to win the war. But they were facing an enemy that had learned from every previous battle. Human ships worked in perfect coordination with their alien allies. They used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. They adapted to every Zenturi strategy within minutes of encountering it. Captain Nick Thompson led a boarding action against the Zenturi flagship. His mixed team of humans and aliens fought their way through the massive ship's corridors. When they reached the bridge, Supreme Commander Nalesh was waiting for them with his personal guard. "You cannot win," Nalesh said, raising his weapon. "Even if you defeat us here, the Empire will send more fleets." Nick looked at the alien commander with something like pity. "There is no Empire anymore. Your home worlds have fallen to rebellions. Your colonies have declared independence. This fleet is all you have left." The final battle ended with the surrender of the remaining Zenturi ships. Supreme Commander Nalesh was dead, killed in the fighting on his own bridge. Of the 300 ships that had attacked Earth, less than 50 survived. Commander Valar found himself in a strange position. He was the highest-ranking Zenturi officer still alive. The humans brought him to Earth for the surrender ceremony. He stood in the Great Assembly Hall of the United Nations building, surrounded by representatives from hundreds of worlds. Many of them were species that had once served the Zenturi Empire. Now they were free, and they had humanity to thank for it. President Janet Miller stepped forward to accept the surrender. She was Earth's first leader to hold the title of Galactic Representative. Behind her stood Admiral Sullivan, a reminder of humanity's military power. "Commander Valar," President Miller said, "do you surrender all Zenturi forces and territories to the Galactic Liberation Alliance?" Valar looked around the room at all the alien faces. A year ago, these species had been subjects of the Empire. Now they were equals in a new galactic government, and it was all because of the humans. "I surrender," he said quietly. Dr. Sam Hayes, now Earth's chief scientist for galactic affairs, presented the terms of surrender. The Zenturi would withdraw to their home system. They would pay compensation for the unprovoked attack on the horizon. Most importantly, they would recognize humanity and its allies as equals in the galaxy. The ceremony was broadcast to every world in the galaxy. Billions of beings watched as the mighty Zenturi Empire officially ended. In its place rose something new, a confederation of free worlds led by the species that had made it all possible. After the ceremony, Commander Valar was taken to meet Dr. Kathavar. The old archaeologist was now considered a hero for his early warnings about humanity. He had been studying the ancient tablets for over 400 years. "You tried to warn us," Valar said. "Why did no one listen?" Dr. Kathavar looked at the ancient stone tablets on his desk. "Because we thought we were the most dangerous species in the galaxy. We had conquered hundreds of worlds. We had defeated every enemy we faced. We could not imagine that something more dangerous existed. What made the humans so different? Velar asked. They do not fight for conquest, Kthavar replied. They fight for survival. And a species fighting for survival will do anything to win. He pointed to one of the tablets. The Velkari wrote this 10,000 years ago. They said the humans were the ones who never stopped fighting. They were right. Velar studied the ancient warning. What happens now? Do the humans plan to conquer the galaxy like we did? That is what makes them truly dangerous, Kthavar said. They do not want to conquer anyone. They want to be left alone. But if you threaten them, they will destroy you completely. Admiral Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the last Zenturi ships leave the solar system. The war was over. Humanity had won, but she knew this was not really an ending. It was a beginning. Earth was now the center of a new galactic civilization. Human technology would spread to hundreds of worlds. Human culture would influence billions of beings. Human military tactics would change how wars were fought throughout the galaxy. But most importantly, the galaxy had learned a lesson that would not be forgotten for thousands of years. On worlds across the galaxy, new warnings were being carved into stone tablets. But these warnings were not about humans. They were warnings written by humans for any species that might threaten Earth in the future. The message was simple and clear. We are humanity. We survived ice ages, plagues, and world wars on our home planet. We turned warfare into a science before we reached the stars. We do not seek conflict, but we excel at it. We prefer peace, but we are very good at war. The ancient warnings spoke truth about us. We are the species that never stops fighting when our survival is threatened. Remember this, and we can be friends. Forget this, and you will become a memory like those who came before you. President Miller stood in her office, looking out at the night sky above Earth. Somewhere out there, on hundreds of worlds, billions of beings were living in freedom because humanity had refused to surrender. The ancient warnings had been right about humans. They were dangerous. They were unstoppable when threatened. They were the kind of species that could bring down galactic empires. But the warnings had missed something important. Humans were also the kind of species that would fight to free others from oppression. They were the kind of species that would sacrifice themselves to protect the innocent. They were the kind of species that would build something better from the ashes of what they had destroyed. The galaxy was entering a new age, an age where freedom was more important than order, an age where no empire could oppress its subjects forever, an age where the ancient warnings had been replaced by ancient promises. And at the center of it all was a small blue planet, where a species had learned the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is fight to survive. Because if you win, you might just change everything.